think, Roderick, this is a great reason not to go out in the rain. Roderick is saying
Yes.
every raindrop sounds like a creeper. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I think there's the difficulty curve is an interesting one for me, because when you make the decision to make a very difficult game, sort of, appealing to that feeling of being elite, not necessarily elitism, but like I am the best of the best. Not everyone can play this game. This is a hardcore, slightly masochistic, Super Meat Boy kind of game. Like it's fair, but it's unforgiving, and the amount of times you're going to fail is brutal. Not everyone can play this game.
I mean, take for
So
example,
you're
Pixel
deliberately making it
Perfect Jump.
non-accessible.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're deliberately making it non-accessible. Where do we stand on that? Like, I think it's an interesting sort of dilemma.
Especially if you've tuned your game incredibly well to someone who's a hardcore player, but you can't just detune it. It's not just a matter of pulling some sliders back, because it changes the whole dynamic of a game.
I remember when the original Wolf came out, Wolf 3D, Wolfenstein, for those who don't know. So the original Castle Wolfenstein came out in the 90s, and there was a difficulty slider. They did the same thing in Doom. And the average difficulty slider showed your character and was called something like dangerous or hardcore, I can't remember. And then there was a nightmare one, and then below that there was like a I am God or whatever, and you like glowing eyes. But if you went further up towards easy, the easiest one was called Baby and had you like in a baby outfit.
Yeah.
And you're actually being discouraged from doing this. And I think it's interesting because often you'll hear game designers saying, no, I don't want to put a difficulty curve in, or I don't want to make this change because I have a very strong idea of how you should play the game.
Yeah.
Is the player right to say, I want an easier version of Souls? Is the game designer right to say, no, you can't have one? I don't have an answer to this. It's just, it becomes an interesting conversation. Like if we're talking about accessibility, are we designing a whole slew of games that simply don't allow people to play?
I suppose another example, moving on for sort of the difficulty side of things, a few years ago, I would like not maybe over a decade. I've still got it somewhere. I bought myself a dance mat, Dance Revolution. I imported it from Sweden because I couldn't find a decent quality one that wasn't just a sheet of vinyl that would break with my weight bouncing on it. So I bought this, brought it over, and I played no end of Dance Revolution. But there were some things there that I physically, even after playing for months, could not achieve. And my realization was perhaps a child can do this with their shorter legs and lighter, faster reflexes. But as you get older, your reflexes slow, and obviously you're bigger, so your reflexes are naturally slower because your nerves are longer. And I was just wondering at that point whether or not the game could be made easier. Obviously, you can have less steps. You could slow the music down. But again, it's...
But at what point are you not playing that game? And does it matter? I don't think this is an easy thing to answer. I find this a lot with board games. I love dexterity games. Ones that, each dexterity game is very different, but some involve balance, some involve flicking things. And I find some of these much
not like Twister.
Twister would be a physical game. You could call it a dexterity game. That could actually be an example.
Yeah.
Is usually manipulating small things like manual dexterity, which sometimes manual dexterity is fine. It's a game that you and I play regularly. Well, not regularly, but reasonably often. Junkart, which is a series of little games involving stupid wooden blocks, and it's a lot of fun.
Brilliant.
And sometimes I'm fine at it, and sometimes I just can't pick the things up properly.
Yeah.
Like I just don't have that kind of manual control. I find there's plenty of games that I simply can't do like that. Like there was a time when DDR would have been no problem. Like when I was going clubbing every week in my 20s and early 30s, fine. Well, early 20s. Now, stairs can be difficult depending on the day. So you'll be able to hop around on a pad.
Like it might loosen you up a little.
It might kill me. But no, it's. I don't know what the answer is for this, but I think it can be important to have the question, especially if you want to make a really challenging game.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with making a really challenging game, one that, makes players feel like their eyes are bleeding every time they play it, and they've got to focus every breath and play perfectly.
Yeah.
But be aware that by definition, you're excluding a lot of people.
And
There's nothing wrong with putting difficulty modes or an easy mode. Or what was there was a very difficult horror game, and then they put in I think it was called tourist mode, and you could just wander around, the enemies wouldn't attack you, and just look around and follow the story.
Oh, nice. That's not a bad addition to a game.
There was another game that I kind of wanted to bring up, which is The Veil, which I've not played.
The Veil.
Which is a medieval RPG with no graphics.
Interesting. Like a text adventure.
No.
Oh.
Only in the headphones.
Very interesting.
So you have real-time combat, but you have to listen for audio cues and decide when you're going to dodge and counterattack and parry. I believe, I haven't played it, but I believe you're playing a blind character who is heir to the throne, and someone tried to assassinate you, and you've got to make your way back. But you're trying to play in that world, so it's not. We've put in this thing where if you're visually challenged, you can still play. We're not putting this thing where we're dumbing it down. It's like, no, this character is in this world, and it's engaging to play. And whether or not you are fully sighted, you are playing like this.
That's interesting, because obviously if you were deaf, that game is impossible.
Right.
Completely impossible. But yeah, that's an interesting take on the genre, actually making the
cool idea, isn't it?
Making the character that you play lose a sense.
Well, I remember playing games with characters like that, but you as the player had the information the character didn't. So it's really a gimmick, right? Well, you get like an echolocation thing or something, like your Daredevil, but this is not that.
I've mentioned Project Zomboid in the past on the channel, but so it's a survivor game, zombies, etc. But when you're sort of like stacking your character at the very beginning, you have positive and negative traits that you can pick. You can pick things like, oh, you don't need a lot of food, or you do need a lot of food, and things like that. And a couple of the ones that you can pick, you can't pick blind, I don't think, but you can pick like bad eyesight, and it does reduce your vision in game. Characters fade in and out of your vision much more slowly. And the other thing that you can play is you can actually play as deaf, and then you don't hear any of the audio cues in the game. And you can also play as partially hearing, in which case you can hear some of the cues in the game, and that does make a big difference.
That playing a blind game as a deaf person doesn't seem like the best use of one's time. Yeah, no, I mean that is asking for trouble.
Yeah, I can see that being an issue at some point.
But I don't know, it does feel like a very atmospheric way of playing a game. Like traveling around a game and having to listen to audio cues to know where you are.
Yes.
Apparently the soundscape is phenomenal. Because if it's just silence and you hear a little bit of running water, like you have to have good sound design for something like this.
Oh, absolutely. I can't imagine it being any other way.
But again, haven't played it. Just something I read about and I thought was interesting. So,
yeah,